welcome back. We're still kicking around, kind of. We're back with another deck tech video. It has been almost a full year since I've recorded anything. Life has been chaos, and I looked over here and saw my recording equipment and just how incredibly dusty all of this was. And I thought it might be time to come back and do some deck tech videos. Now, I'm not a content creator. I am doing this mainly for myself. I love showcasing the progressive history of decks, showing the cards I owned at one point in time for myself, because I'm a very vain individual. But these are good deck tech videos. These are also good reference points, and that's what we're doing today. This is a deck tech video for Akroma, Angel of Fury, and we'll get to her in just a second here. But what we're really doing today is we're going to be talking about the progressive power creep in the format and how that has changed the staples that we have seen in a commander that we're sticking with over the years. And why that's actually easy for us to do in this video is in my channel, which has been around for an eternity. Over a decade ago, I have an Akroma Angel of Fury deck. Now, there's a few deck videos showing her different variants. There was like a Devotion one and a Linear Voltron one. But we have a history to rely on. We can actually show, if you would like to go search them back on my channel, enjoy. But we can actually pinpoint and talk about what card was used a decade ago and how that card may have been used or updated to today, or if it's still worth even playing. And that's kind of the point of this video. Now, I have been offline for like well over a year, and I have a whole quiver of my normal decks. I'm a Grixis player at heart and a Rakdos fan. But I have one color combination of every Grixis deck. So what I might end up doing this month, which is, it's June, it is Pride Month, yay! So what I will probably do is over the month with my free time, I'll go ahead and just try to do a deck tech video on all that I'm currently running. And then we are on also the cusp of the Final Fantasy set coming out, which is another reason I'm thinking about doing this, because there is some serious power creep coming out, and it's getting a little aggravating. And I can go off on tangents talking about that. I'll try not to put my tinfoil hat too much on this time. But let's go ahead and start talking about the deck, and I'll ramble on as we go. And if you're new to the channel, welcome. I'm not a content creator. I'm just doing this for my own enjoy. I don't care if you like or subscribe. Sit back and enjoy, look at the shiny cards. If you have comments, if you love some old, really outdated commanders, please share them with me, because that is my passion. I love the underdogs. I love playing something that requires significant mental investment, not just EDH rec deck teching it to sign up. One of the videos I want to make is actually regarding an Is-It commander, which EDH rec, I believe, has ruined any potential people making the deck. And it's a financial... Oh, tangent already. Let's get back to the deck tech. Now, let's go ahead and talk about the Akroma here. I'm not going to get into the lore. If you know the lore, this is a red shifted of the white Akroma Angel of Wrath, which is Ixidor's creation, blah, 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 blah. Big story, fun books, go read them. But we have the shifted version, this card from this set. This is over 15, nearly 20 years old. So in Commander, she is wildly outdated, wildly underpowered compared to what we're seeing nowadays. But I have a passion for this card. So we're running him, or her. We have an 8 mana angel with 3 pips of red. Mono red, angel, legendary, flying, obviously. The other text box here is a little variant of the Angel of Wrath. She has the trample pro white, pro blue, cannot be countered, fire breathing. Morph is also here. A lot of people always complain that why does this gigantic red creature not have haste? The theory is you're supposed to morph her out earlier. Morph creatures are already in play, thus do not need haste. If we were to see this card printed in today's era, this text box would be a novel. There would be so many extra things going on here for 8 mana. But I digress. Now, as someone who has loved this card, again, if you're familiar with my channel, you know I kind of blipped off the radar there for about 4 years. I sold 95% of my collection. I kept a binder full of basic lands and a handful of cards, including this piece of paper. This exact card is the same piece of paper in my older videos, but we have a few more Akromas now. This is a secret layer that was printed. I think the secret layer, if I don't know if this is confirmed, but the secret layer was printed in response to the Therese artwork issue. There's a little bit of controversy between this artwork. This is gorgeous, but this particular artist might not be I'm not going to get into that here. It is a situation where you need to make a choice if you can separate the artist from the art they make. It's like a Chick-fil-A. Do you really like Chick-fil-A enough to go there versus what they might represent? It's a player choice. I like this artwork. I am choosing to ignore or hope for the best situation regarding the artist. But also, with the advent of 3D or AI art, you can get a bunch of fun custom artworks made. Some of these are off Etsy, some of these were custom requests, but we love Akroma. Now let's go ahead and stick her over here and talk about the creatures. I will randomly pause throughout this video while I try to reference the older versions of what the cards used to be. We're starting with creatures, and that's kind of the biggest change in the power level of what these decks do is actually card advantage. In the older sets of mono red EDH, your card advantage was very limited. We started with like the earliest versions of Mind's Eye. We had to pay one when someone draws. Something like a Staff and Nin for an upkeep extra draw. You're using Armillary Spheres, you can get 2 lands out of your deck. As time changed, some more effects came out. A few of these exile matter effects, and a few better effects. Something that could like strictly replace Staff and Nin was like the Immortal Sun or something like that. Wheel of Fortune effects is a whole other tangented topic with Memory Jar and how they've changed over the years. But the exile effects matter. That's a new archetype, and more of those cards got printed specifically in the last 4 years. So much so that the entire draw package of this deck is based on red creatures that have the Exile Matters effect in combat. So we've been able to translocate our draw package into the creatures. Let's start off with the actual package of creatures and just go through them. There's the obvious ones. Classically, Burnished Heart and Solemn Simulacrum are always in a mono red style deck. The power level of this deck, I should probably go ahead and mention. This is essentially a battle cruiser deck. The bracket system makes this confusing because a battle cruiser deck is a very low powered, very slow deck. And even though this is absolutely considered a battle cruiser deck, I'm still running 3 game changers. I have a whole opinion about that topic. The game changers in the deck, we'll get to them, but the game changers make this a bracket 3, but this is still considered a battle cruiser deck. This is not going to compete efficiently with other bracket 3 decks. This was a deck, in fact, that used to run these cards. And these cards, this one would immediately put into bracket 4. These two are banned. Cards like this were necessary to make an 8 mana do almost nothing commander function correctly and actually have a chance to compete. But that's not an option for us utilizing the bracket system. So we are technically bracket 3, but as a battle cruiser deck, this does not function well against other bracket 3s. But anyways, Burnished Heart and Solemn Simulacrum, always good for the ramp. As a mono red deck, we still love playing Valakut. So these are good ways of sneaking out mountains and burning with Valakut. This is a new version of Burnished Heart. It has to attack. There is a nice complement of equipment in the deck. Some of them, like, this is sort of the Animus. Let's get one you can actually read. Bitterthorn, for example. It's fantastic to put on something that cannot be blocked. So sometimes you don't want to actually sacrifice this. It just depends on your rest of your hand and the rest of your game plan. But these are the 3 generic, almost always going to be included in mono red for a little bit of ramp value. But let's go ahead and talk about this new trend of creatures that give you card advantage whenever they attack or do combat damage or some kind of Exile Matters effect. Anip is very cute. Anip likes to get sleepy. He exerts himself when you declare him as an attacker. Well, you may exert him when you declare him as an attacker, and you get the top 2 cards of your deck for a period of time. This is just one of many effects. For a trample body for 3 mana, decent, but it's always fun. Just Anip, he gets sleepy. Crimson Carabiner is from the Fallout set. This is essentially a pseudo reprint of one of the original times we saw this effect. Prophetic Flame Speaker, double strike trample, both 3 mana, both 1/1/3, 1/1/2. Exile is the top card of your deck. We have that until end of turn, and double strike means you do it twice. The Carabiner creates a junk token, which does almost the same thing. It is a permanent that you can, at sorcery speed, sacrifice to impulse the top of your deck. These are very good with equipment because they are double strike creatures. You have a sword that does something when it connects in combat, double strike, much better. Moving on down, we have a professional Facebreaker, a nice little menace 2/3. Makes treasures. You can then sack the treasures to get some cards off the top of your deck. We have a Layla. This is very good. She exiles immediately upon being declared as an attacker. She gets a little bit bigger, and you have access to them in a turn. You're seeing literally this is just a stack of creatures that are our card advantage. These are how we get our cards in this deck. Headliner Scarlet. This is Judith. I call it Red Judy. Upkeep. It's a secret hidden card. It's face down that the opponents don't get to see. It's usually just a mountain. You can hold her back if you want to remove blockers, but most of our creatures are already attacking anyways. We have Atoshi. I cannot pronounce this thing. It is a flying piece of sushi. It is made to die. It is a fantastic blocker. We don't care if it dies. It's here to die. We have Dragonhawk, another legendary. A lot of these are actually legendary if you're looking at them. This one cares about the power. When it comes into play or declares an attacker or another creature, you just get another card or so off the top of your deck. A lot of these are very terrifying and tend to die anyways. More legendaries matter. This is the worst Urbrask, I believe, but it's the friendly one. I usually use the verbiage that we have to share with the class whenever the opponents go around and have to show us what they're replacing their draw with every turn. Even though this is one of the worst Praetors ever printed, he still just makes people unhappy because he's a Praetor, and some people just don't like seeing or sharing with the class whatever their draw was for that turn. But he does most notably give us that extra exile, but also our draw step, so we still get that extra card. Bone Horde Dracosaur is a flying dinosaur dragon. This thing's funny. This card has a very hard time making it to your upkeep because I think people knew about it from the standard environment, which I skipped. But he tends to come with bodies, treasure, and some cards. We have one that no longer does the exile trick. We'll get on to the rest here. Nullspine Dragon is one of the very few creatures that has survived the deck list, my personal deck list, since the beginning. This has always been a fantastic Akroma style card. Akroma likes to hit one player really, really hard, usually killing them. Damage is known even if a player is killed, so this post-combat is usually a discard your hand, draw 15-ish plus. This is just a very expensive dragon. It's wonderful to hide under his land. There's a thematic land. I only have 7 in the deck, but we have the Nullspine Null to go with the dragon. We'll get to that a little more shortly here, but hold this up for late game. Try not to dump it early game. If the worst case scenario is just attack for 3 if your hand's trash, but we're hoping to get a big value off this guy. O'Hare, I'm not fond of this card. I've tried it. I plan on replacing this card whenever the Final Fantasy cards come out with this Kate Sith, because it is another legendary. It does another exile thing where we can get some kind of card advantage, and it's the same mana. Now, the trample body on here is cool because it helps with equipment, but just realistically, I don't care. This is just not a good card in this deck, and I don't think there's many decks, unless you're really building around this damage amplification source, no. Neheb is fantastic, mainly to help us get our commander in play. The other Neheb was in here for a while to help us draw and discard, but this extra mana is essentially like a free ritual every turn, and being that our commander costs 8, we have a pretty steep curve on this deck. This guy is terrifying on his own, and just getting a little bit of extra mana off of one combat. He doesn't have to be the one that has to hit. It can be you cast him first main phase, attack for 5 or so, and then you get your mana back. It's fantastic. Karlash is another terrifying card. This is basically one of a few extra combat tricks in the deck. She does grant first strike, which is very helpful for a lot of our ground attackers. We have Morog, which is a slightly confusing card if you don't know the layering of when you do or do not play lands, especially if you have lands coming into play in different parts of the turn cycle. But his landfall, untap your guys, get another combat as long as it's a particular main phase. We have a very fancy Godo. We have a nice equipment package in here. Godo is another one of the cards that has lasted the entirety. Every deck list I've had Akroma in, there's always been a Godo. He always gets some kind of value equipment. It could have just been the original one where I always ran Sword of Vengeance, which was flavorfully Akroma's sword. But Godo here has just always been more than good enough, an exceptional addition to any deck that has... If you have 3 or 4 equipment in your deck and you're splashing red, just stick a Godo in your deck, because getting it into play, you're not just tutoring it to your hand, you're tutoring it to play. So that's a mana cheat. I just always recommend Godo. And the final creature of this deck is the Cavern Horde Dragon. There was a few places that this could have been, like, in the old era of EDH, this could have just been a giant Eldrazi to recycle your deck, or an Udvara Hellkite. Is that the one that steals? Whatever the tyrant is that steals people's artifacts. There's always some extra backup flying creature that's always been in the Akroma deck list. And this is the current best one, in my opinion, because he comes out cheaper, he makes treasures, and it's, in general, a very threatening card. That is a lot of creatures for our deck, but again, this is our card advantage. We have a lot of our cards here are designed to give us extra cards throughout the game. Next, let's move on to the spells. Now, normally in my old deck tech videos, I would break it down to instances and sorceries. This whole stack is all of the spells put together. They're by kind of like their card type. And there's a few of these pieces that, again, they're reminiscent of the old versions of what an old Akroma deck might have ran. Like a Faithless Looting, for example, could have been Seize the Spotlight. What this is essentially 3 mana, almost always draw 3, make 3 treasure tokens. Sometimes someone won't have a creature for you to borrow. A lot of people are afraid of sacrifice outlets when it comes to this card. So this is almost always, in my opinion, basically like an Ancestral Recall, which is fantastic in red. Now you can, of course, play political games. If you want to borrow someone's commander to do damage to someone else, active treason effects are fantastic. They're usually highly situational, but this one has upside, being that it can give you cards instead. The downside is obviously if players don't have creatures, then they can choose to give you nothing. But that's still good. This is our first game changer in the deck, is a Jessica's Will. It is very difficult for us to get our commander in play to get this early. We don't really like morphing out Akroma unless we absolutely have to. But just as a general ritual in general, this is still actually relatively good, because this ritual can help get Akroma in play, because it's usually someone always has 7 or more. Talking about Wheel of Fortune effects, one of the oldest reasons to even run red in EDH was to gain access to Wheel of Fortune. Another draw 7, essentially. But over the time, so much card advantage has been stuck onto all these commanders, these new power creep commanders that come with card advantage, token creation, techie cards, all synergy built into the cards. Wheel of Fortune is just not good. So even when you start seeing dedicated cards like an artifact deck that might want to run something like a Memory Jar, which was just considered a default necessary piece a decade ago, that's not actually good enough anymore. So even like a Wheel of Fortune, which was classically one of the reasons to run red in EDH, it's not really good enough anymore, is it? This one's different, and if I were to ever take Akroma out of this deck for any other legendary, this is one of 2 cards I would change, because this shell of a deck is very good for generic mono red decks. I could literally just change this card and one other card and put Rorik's Bladewing in the command zone. This deck would just be very fun. But this one's unique because this matters about the commander's mana value. She is an 8 mana costing commander. Most opponents don't like forced wheels. They will retaliate if they make you discard their hand. But they have a choice here. They don't have to. Most commanders in today's era are 4 mana or less. There's always someone playing maybe like the Dragon that might really benefit from this. But a lot of commanders recently are 4 or less mana. They're more value engine pieces, so they're not really expensive. No one really likes putting big expensive things in their command zone they may never play. So most people decline this offer, which means that this is a 5 mana, we discard our hand and draw 8. That's actually very good. Again, if I were to switch this over to any other mono red random beat stick of a commander, this probably might just become a Wheel of Fortune again. We have another extra combat step. I love Savage Beating. Entwining this is fantastic. Then we have Seize the Day. This one is a little troublesome. We have 2 effects in our deck. They give a creature protection from red, and this targets a creature. This one does not. All the creatures, like Karlash, they don't target creatures. They just generically affect your creatures, but this one targets. So if we have something that gives protection from red, we cannot utilize this spell. But this is, again, one of those, both of these actually are classically some of the best old original Akroma tech that have survived the decades. Both of these usually line up to kill 1 or more players, because if you utilize fire breathing and you get 3 combats out of 1 card, someone can very easily die. Akroma has fire breathing, and she's 6 power. So if you literally have 1 mana to make her 7 power, and then you use this card, the 4 mana here, and the 3 for buyback, you're using 8 mana and 1 card to 21 commander damage someone out of the game. Being that this has flashback, you can save this or discard it earlier and use it again later. Fantastic card, always good with Akroma. Savage Beating uses this for your entire team. This is usually a game ender card if you entwine it. But going on, we are talking about some removal. Now, this is another card that has replaced a lot of staples over the years, and the staples over the years have changed because we used to use Starstorm. Starstorm was like one of the classic mono red board wipes. It was instant speed. You could cycle it if you didn't need it, but it was an X-Spell. X-Spells are hard to use in EDH because sometimes you don't have enough mana. Then I think Chain Reaction was one of those replacements that came out that people wanted to replace the X-Spell with. And then slowly more board wipes came over time, and this is just currently the new era's version of a good board wipe. Only does 5 damage. Well, from Exile. We almost always foretell this. I mean, you can like pyroclasm things at instant speed if you really need to. But this is here mainly to get that extra 5 damage, and it hits the opponents too, which is good. We do have the more classic board wipe, the one that has survived the eras of EDH. Blast Fact has always been good. It will always be good. It is almost always 1, 2, or 3 mana at most. And again, there are a few effects in our deck that give protection from red. So if we have that out, this will not hurt our creatures. Going on down, we have the second card in the deck that is unique to Akroma. This only cares about a face-down card. Akroma has Morph. So if she is morphed upside down, and we have this nice instant speed spell in our hand, we can use 5 mana to auto-morph her, and then we will be able to do 6 damage to each creature our opponents control. There's a few tricks here. This is a singular paragraph. So even though she has fire breathing, there is no time in which I would have priority to utilize the fire breathing to increase her power. But if you have a global effect, giving all of your creatures ++, it will take effect anyways. Like, it will know that she is bigger. More importantly, if she has some kind of lifelink, this creature is doing the damage. So if there's like a few creatures out and you flip her and she has lifelink, you're going to gain about 100-some life. So that's a fun thing, because if a morphed creature does not change zones, equipment and enchantments will stay on a morphed creature. One of the other random rules about having a morph commander, which I believe is still just Akroma, no matter what, you have to track commander damage. So if you have 20 morphs, one of them is your commander hidden somewhere in those 20 morphed creatures. You have to tell your opponents which one is your commander, because that, even though it's morphed upside down, that is still 2 points of commander damage. It's a very unique situation. It's only going to come up with just Akroma, I believe. But going on, more generic red cards that somehow have survived the time, being able to bolt the bird on turn 1 is always a fantastic move. It is something that will always be a fantastic move. There are so many amazing 1-drops, low toughness, 3 damage, or 3 toughness creatures that you need to kill. Anything from a Drannith Magistrate to preventing anybody from casting their commander, just killing a mana dork or some kind of hate piece like a Dothy Voidwalker that you need your graveyard. Always run some kind of spot removal. We don't have access to like a murder type spell, a path or swords or anything like that, but this is still very good. Now, my deck does run 2 fork effects. These are currently the 2 newest and best. It used to literally just be fork and reverberate. We used to see reiterate and wild ricochet. Those are like the classic, always 1 or 2 of in a mono red EDH deck over the years, because it's always handy to have access to them. You could use them early. You can fork someone's Cultivate just to help you stay ahead with them. If you know someone's building up to do an Exandronate or a Torment of Hailfire, you hold it back for the whole game, then you win that game, because obviously the fork is all it takes to win. But that effect has always been fantastic. Now, these are the two newest versions that I believe are the best versions that I've been running. The one that can be free is essentially just sacking one of our red dudes. This one's very fun and chaotic because it could be giving everybody at the table access to a spell. So sometimes if someone runs out a random demonic tutor, or a tutor effect, or even like a Cultivate or a Kodama's Reach, that's when you want to pop this one off, because getting like 3 Cultivates or 4 Cultivates off of one spell puts this style of deck insanely far ahead. And a lot of people won't say no to a Cultivate. But yeah, these are the kind of very fun and entertaining cards that I believe, if you're playing mono red, you should at least have a fork or reverberate effect in your deck. And these are my 2 recommendations for the current era. Electro Dominance is a fun pet card I've been playing for it's almost in every deck that has red, actually, I believe, because it just gives you access to flash. You can flash out a snapped blocker equipment. You can do something like put a permanent into play at flash speed at the end of an opponent's turn that they really don't want to see coming into play. It is also direct damage, so you can use this to do direct burn damage to an opponent if you can't get through combat. This is a techie card that just adds flash to one of your spells. So you hold on to this until late game. It does suck seeing early. We have Price of Progress, one of the cards that has always been in an Akroma style deck. Most decks nowadays really like non-basic lands. There's so many fantastic non-basic lands now. But this is something that I believe I'm only running 7 out of my 37 decks are non-basic. But this is still a game-ending card, because a lot of people are really greedy with their non-basic lands. Like, yes, I cannot run Ruination in this bracket. Ruination is a fantastic card. This is literally one of the best reasons to play mono red. But what I can do is still punish you for playing those greedy lands. And everyone seems to really be on 3+ color commanders with all these new precons. So this is usually a game-ending card. 2 mana, instant speed at the end of someone's turn, or if that 5-player Kenrith deck is going crazy, you just hold up those 2 mana and you wait. Insurrection is a card I used to loathe. I absolutely used to hate this card. It's like the Rise of the Dark Realms, the Expropriate, the Exandronate, that style of card that just always ends the game. Unfortunately, as power creep has come, those game-ending cards, the Craterhoof Behemoths, the Moonlight Cavaliers, the mana value of those have dropped significantly. So we're seeing more things like Akroma's Will, other cards that just naturally end the game quicker. So by excluding what our caller has access to, our caller has access to one of those cards, and we have it. By excluding it, we are significantly making the deck worse. And it is good to just have a backup plan in the bag when your creatures all fail to a better creature strategy. It's kind of necessary, I believe. And while I used to hark on saying that cards like this were bad for the format, the truth is those cards are constantly being printed again. More of them are being printed at better mana cost and not in mono red. Because we don't have access to those cards, I've been actually playing this again. So while this is classically an Akroma card, I personally never used to run it. I am running it now. It's necessary, and I would recommend still sticking it. Mana Geyser, this is a little bit out of order, but Mana Geyser is another one of those cards that if you see it at any stage of the game when you can cast it, you're going to jump ahead a few turns. Now, the reason this is in the deck is mainly because we have an 8-mana commander, and this helps us get her into play. But we also do have one last spell in the deck, which is a Past in Flames. Now, I'm showing a bit of my age here because I used to love Storm in Modern, using gifts and Past in Flames and going off with the little Electromancers. That was good times, and I love Past in Flames. I love Yawgmoth's Will. Those are some of my baby cards. This is in this deck specifically because most of these spells are incredibly powerful. These are not game-changing spells, but they are game-warping spells that will impact and probably end the game if we have access to them a second time. The alternative here could be to use Mizzix's Mastery, which would auto-cast one of the spells for us. We only really need to cast one of these spells maybe more than once. Like any one of these spells, if we cast them more than one time, there's no reason we should not have won the game. Now, Mizzix's Mastery does cast that for you, but we may not have access to Mizzix's Mastery the entire game. We might have discarded Mizzix's Mastery, or maybe we need to do it more than once, and because this has flashback itself, I have chosen Past in Flames over Mizzix's Mastery. We do need a little bit of recursion. We don't have a Underworld Breach in this deck, which is a fantastic card, but this deck doesn't have enough mana creation to utilize that efficiently. We could just stick a Lion's Eye Diamond and Wheel of Fortune and go ham, but we're not going to do that. So at least I always recommend at least one type of recursion spell. Mizzix's Mastery is a good card. This is my preference for this deck. Now, before we move on to the giant pile of artifacts, because let's be honest, mono red artifacts, you know they're coming. Let's go to the last two permanents in the deck that have red color pips. Classically, in my deck techs, I think since like 2015, I've always ran one Planeswalker in every deck, unless it's like a dedicated Planeswalker deck. And this deck is no different. And I do that for a few reasons. It gives me an essence of wanting to protect this one Planeswalker more, because if you have multiple Planeswalkers, you might give yourself the thought that you can just get them back or protect the next one coming up. But if you have just one to protect, it is more of a valuable piece to you, the player. In this one, I chose Chandra, Torch of Defiance. I think she's consistently been one of the best mono-red Planeswalkers for the longest time. Originally, it was always Koth of the Hammer. Koth was essentially a ritual that could become a win condition if he was left unchecked. And that was a very powerful Planeswalker a decade ago. In today's era of EDH, it is very hard for a mono-red deck to protect Koth without you actually having the chance of ever reaching his emblem. It is better instead to get one of these Planeswalkers that has an instantaneous impact on the game. So Ujin would have maybe been the second choice here as a board wipe. Karn is always good for spot removal, but I really like this Chandra. There's a lot of Chandras that have the exile effect to give you card advantage, but she can also give us a bit of mana. There's a few effects in the deck where we really want to be able to just push one extra or two extra mana ahead to help us get Akroma out. And she's one of them. Rarely do we do anything other than just +1 her for the card, though. The second other permanent in the deck is a Fiery Emancipation. This is sandbagged in our hand until the last possible moment. This is the kind of card that is just, if you put it into play and you don't interact or do something with it to use it immediately, then you're just waiting for someone to disenchant it. But this one card with just a few creatures is a game-ending card. Like, even with our commander just popping in here with just her, we don't even have to activate Fire Breathing, and she's already doing 18 damage. You literally just Fire Breathe one time on her, and that's a kill. Fantastic card, a wild card. This is, again, a card that there's always been some kind of damage amplification in older versions of Akroma. There used to be Furnace of Wrath was the original. Dictate of the Twin Gods came out in 2012, 13, whenever Theros came out. We essentially had a flash version. Older versions also used to run Gratuitous Violence. And I know there's also City on Fire, another damage tripler, not a doubler. But those effects, there's always been good to have like one or two of those in your deck. I also love the spell Insult to Injury, because that's something that you can use in your hand. But I just like this one because it's a permanent, it's a repeatable effect over turns. You can hold this up in a burn spell in your hand, like a lightning bolt, to just randomly dome somebody for 9. Next, let's go on to the giant stack of artifacts, because obviously as mono red, there's going to be a big stack of rocks. Starting with the equipment. Some of these are shiny promo cards, so they may look a little different. This is Sword of the Animist. This came out originally in Magic Origins, and it literally has been in every mono-red deck since then. If you have creatures in your deck and you're not playing green, this is a fantastic inclusion. It is made even better if you run things like a Valakut in your deck, because you're punching out extra sources of colorless damage. But the best thing about this particular equipment is they've made more versions of it over the years. This is a newer card. This is I guess something happened to the sword in the story. I don't know. But this is Sword of the Animist with a germ token. It just costs more. But you can still just throw that sword with the germ straight into combat. Even if it's going to die, you're going to get another mountain. We also have 2 swords that do kind of the same thing when they do combat damage. Sword of Hearth and Home will flicker and get an untapped mountain from our deck into play when the creature connects. And Sword of Forge and Frontier exiles more cards off the top of our deck and gives us an opportunity to play a land, like an extra land. So that's 4 equipment that literally help us ramp, which is fantastic. And lands are always going to be better than mana rocks in this format. Lightning Greaves is, again, one of those classic cards that has withstood the test of time. Swiftfoot Boots could be in here as well, but this is a problematic one because Swiftfoot Boots allows us to target our own creatures if we want to equip them or use Seize the Day to get that extra combat. With Lightning Greaves, we have to move the equipment around, which makes us a little bit vulnerable. Now, Embercleave is one of my favorite cards in this deck, especially when you utilize Godo. Godo can put Embercleave straight into play. Embercleave then can automatically equip to a creature. One of the more fun lines is to use Sword of Hearth and Home and Godo in combat. And if you get a second combat and you don't attack with like an Akroma, but you have a second combat lined up, so say you hit with Godo, you flicker Godo and get your land, Godo comes back into play, you have your second combat lined up, you get an Embercleave, and you snap the Embercleave onto an Akroma, then you have your second combat. That's just one of those really funny lines that after a while you can create in your head. It's just, oh, it's wild. But moving on away from Embercleave, where did I just put that? Oh, there it is. Shadow Spear, there's 2 equipment that give lifelink in the deck. There is a Batter Skull and a Shadow Spear. The extra germ token is fantastic. Equipping 5 really sucks. Now, this is actually another one of the reasons why I chose to do this. I think it was about a month or 2 ago, I had a game where I was very precariously low on life total. So I got a Godo, and I said verbally, I'm going to use Godo to go get a Batter Skull and put into play. Everyone at the table, yeah, sure, okay, that's fine. I guess one of the players didn't know what Batter Skull was. And that's kind of showing my age here, because you always assume everybody knows what a Batter Skull is. But not everyone played in that era. Not everyone's played more than, like in the past 4 years, really, has anyone needed or seen a Batter Skull in any kind of constructed format outside of an equipment random deck? And even then, is this actually good enough? What happened in that game is he got mad because I had onboard lifelink without announcing that I had onboard lifelink. But I announced that I put a Batter Skull into play. My assumption was that he knew. His assumption was that I would have announced lifelink. So both of us were in the wrong. But that is another one of those funny situations that makes a video like this kind of interesting to me, because to me, Batter Skull should be always a known card, but if anyone's just been playing in the past 4 years, and you've only played EDH in the past 4 years, there's no reason you should know what a Batter Skull is. It's not good enough for most of these precons. That's an opinion. It's just one of these situations that's kind of funny. But going on, we have another germ equipment that Godo likes to put into play is the Cauldron Complete. This is another fun card to flash into play if you have the Electro Dominance, because this is a very awkward blocker to run creatures into. It exiles things. Very big thing, but also extremely expensive to equip if that germ dies. Moving on, we have one last equipment. This is here mainly because it can flip into a good land that can give us extra mana, but we have also the Compass to go with it. Classically, in mono red style decks, there is usually around 8 to 12 mana rocks or mana effects. And a lot of those rocks over the times have been replaced with being able to put lands into play instead of a mana rock. That just is a significantly harder thing to deal with. Opponent is not going to blow up a land as quickly as they're going to blow up a mana rock. So something like these, while they're not offensively very powerful, we don't really need a Maze of Ith in this deck, which is what this transforms into. On the overlay of the screen, I'll show what these cards transform into. These are here because they become lands. Moving on down, we have some more card advantage. Palantir of Orthanc, I cannot pronounce any of these cards. This is an excellent source of card advantage. Again, over the years, different card draw effects in the deck. It could have been like the Endless Atlas, which draws you cards per the basics you have. Like if you have matching basics, you can tap it to draw one. It could be a Jarlum Tomb if you want to go way back. Staffanin effects, the 1 extra card per turn effects. This is the current best version of what that used to be. I think the last time I ran Akroma was 2018 or 19. It was before I purged everything, saving money for the transition. And I think the last effect that this was in that deck was it was a 4-mana artifact that everyone had a choice on your upkeep to blow things up or you just draw another card. And it was from the Conspiracy set. I'm blanking on the card name. I'll remember it when I'm editing and I'll put a picture up. But currently, there's a 3-mana version. Usually what happens is the first 2 or 3 turns, someone takes a few points of damage, but then you will always draw a card. We have the next game changer in the deck. The One Ring. Oh boy. Okay, so again, this is a deck that used to run cards like this. And this card is far more degenerately broken than these 2 cards. This deck specifically used these cards fairly because it was an 8-mana commander. It was a very fair deck. We're not doing degenerate broken things. This card is in general just broken. I don't think this should be legal in the format. I know that this was just a cash grab. It was Hasbro making money. But this is absolutely the best draw mechanic in the colors that we have access to. If we want to repeatedly draw, we don't need or care about the protection. You can abuse that with some kind of clone flicker effects. That's very tempting and fun to do if you want to have your friends hate you. But we're running the One Ring. This is a win more card in most cases. This literally could just say draw 5 cards, and I would probably play that instead so I could sell this thing because I don't like the idea of investing in this card. I deeply feel like this is going to be banned. But it's a cash grab. Now, going on down, we have a little bit of remnants of old Akroma deck techs. So the old Akroma decks used to run mana doublers, a lot of mana doublers, and we would have the other Gauntlet of Power in here, the 5-mana one from Time Spiral, and we would have a Sculpting Steel. And the goal was to get one of the mana doublers out, then you would clone it with a Sculpting Steel or something like that. Because a mana doubler allowed our 8-mana commander with fire breathing to very quickly and efficiently kill the player. And that was one of those like must deal with threats. Now, Gauntlet of Power, the Time Spiral one, is probably the worst of the group because it affects your opponents. They get the bonus as well, like this one. But it's 5 mana instead of 4. It's just another big artifact that if you waste your entire turn tapping out for and it gets blown up, you've been time walked. Mirage Mirror is cool because you can use this to copy these. Mirage Mirror is a fantastic card in general because you can use this to make an extra land if you want. If someone tries to blow up artifacts, there's really good lands you can make copies of. You can make this a surprise blocker targeting an opponent's creature. You can make this into an Omniscience if someone plays that. This is one of those cards that has always been generically good since it's been printed. This is also, to me, still a new card, even though it's 8 or 10 years old at this point. But this is something that I would 100% recommend. If you ever play big red, mono red, near Voltron, or Battle Cruiser style decks, stick this in your deck and you'll thank me. But we have these extra mana doublers, and flavorfully we have Akroma's Memorial in here. This gives all of our creatures the attributes of Akroma, Angel of Wrath, the original white Akroma. Flavorfully, I used to have Sword of Vengeance in here, which is the sword white Akroma held in her hand, but that's just not good enough anymore. But this protection from red, the other pro red on this, I mentioned that earlier in the video, was on the Sword of Forge and Frontier gives pro red. So there are 2 cards in my deck, the non-bow with giving pro red, Ember Cleave, and the extra combat spell require targeting a red creature. And if you have any of these effects out, these fall off. They will not work correctly. But that's just something that you have to think about when you're playing. And make sure you don't like throw them out there just to get destroyed because you can't target correctly. But this is still a game-ending effect, giving our commander everything but more power, essentially. And all the protections except from green. Now we're on to some last bits of mana effects. Wayfarer's Bauble has sustained the test of time. It has always been good in a deck where you want to have access to instant speed landfall so you can do some extra damage. And it's just always good to have that. It's our best version of a rampant growth we have. Expedition map is here exclusively to get Valakut. There are a few other lands it can get, but a Valakut is the primary target. Now this is a joke. Do not run Mox Tantalite. This is a placeholder for when I hope they eventually unban the Mana Crypt. I don't think they're going to unban the Mana Crypt. So my spiteful little hipster brain told me to run the most useless Mana Rock possible. So what happened, there's also the Soul Talisman. There's another Suspend Soul Ring I could have put in here instead. And I was thinking about doing that as a joke, but this is not a good card. Do not run this card. What happens here is Suspend 3 means you put this in exile for 3 turns and you get a free Mox, which is great, right? No, we're in a format where people play bounce. So what happens is people see this and then they think it's just funny to Devastation Tide or Cyclonic Rift or bounce it to your hand, which means you cannot put it back into play for 3 more turns. This literally invites people to troll you. But, I mean, this should be a Mana Crypt, so... going on down, obviously there's a Soul Ring. Soul Ring is always going to be here. Mind Stone, another Mana Rock that has lasted the test of time. Other cards like a Commander Sphere have been in and out here. Thrawn Dynamo is in a weird one. You would think that this would just be any of the more efficient, newer Mana Rocks, but this is classically an Akroma Mana Rock. Because if we are hitting our landfalls and we have 4 mana on turn 4, we play this on turn 5. If we play our mountain for turn 5, we have access to 8 mana for Akroma. There's a few other Mana Rocks that do this, not many. And I just really like having Thrawn Dynamo. I love having access to my vintage classic foils. Just a beautiful card. But very similar to this, we have Throne of Eldraine. This is a big Mana Rock. It gets blown up very quickly. But the reason this is here is actually because we can use this to draw a few extra cards. That's literally the only reason this has sustained in the deck. There are better Mana Rock options, but the draw a card effect here is actually very helpful. And let's wrap this video up with going on to the lands. Now, all of my EDH decks have consistently had about 37 lands, unless there was a super low curve deck or some kind of lands matter deck. 37 is a sweet spot number because it is a good number of lands and you put about 8-ish Mana Rock effects in your deck. That evens out to having enough mana sources for most commander needs. So we have 37 lands total, 7 non-basic lands, and then I'll show you the pretty basics in a second. But obviously Valakut, a very key piece, very good to run in this style of deck where you have access to landfall from equipment and artifacts and creatures that you can put lands into play for you. Used to run things like Vesuva and Thespian Stage to copy Valakuts. But that's a little bit slower than we can deal with because that takes up a spot in your lands, meaning you have to have 6, 7, or 8 lands in play to start having effects for your Valakut. You really want to have access to your Valakut soon, and copying the Valakut, while very good, it can be time-consuming and stressful on your lands. It also highlights and emphasizes that this is a threatening thing that needs to get destroyed. But going on, we have Temple of the False God. This probably shouldn't be in the deck. This is here because I have this. I've been holding on to one final copy of this card. This is one of those final cards that lasted in my binder with all those lands. And I just stuck it in this deck because, realistically, this is a battle cruiser deck that goes very late game. We're not looking at it earlier than turn 5 or 6 kill. We're looking at a turn 8 to 12 game. So this usually is good enough. We have the final game changer in the deck. Ancient Tomb does very little to help this deck accelerate. It is just 1 extra mana, but this is still considered a game changer. But this is the style of game changer that is actually relevant enough to help the deck function better than it would without an Ancient Tomb. We have a terrain generator to go with the Valakut and a Thawing Glaciers. These are 2 more of those classic mono red staples. This has always been playable in any deck just for slow card advantage. This is not ramp, but this is card advantage because it goes and replaces itself and eventually comes back to you. If you can twiddle this, which means untapping, you can use this multiple times per turn, which is very good. But being very realistic, this doesn't tap for mana on its own, and this is very slow. This is not good card advantage because you're every other turn having to play a tap land. I don't know if this is actually good enough, but we still have this card from our very old deck. Same thing, Terrain Generator, it might not be good enough anymore. There's so many amazing non-basic lands that we have access to, like the haste lands, all these new crazy ones. But this allows us to just instant speed punch out a mountain for our Valakut. It's just another classic card that it may not have actually sustained the test of time, but we're still playing it. Myriad Landscape has been a staple since it got printed in the Commander 2013, 14, whatever set. Just another 2-for-1 effect. And finally, we have the Spine Rock Knoll, another one of those very good classic mono red staples. Just any kind of deck that does damage or wants to hold up mana, because this 7 damage requirement to get the free card doesn't have to be from you. This breaks the timing restriction of casting the card. So if an opponent does 7 damage to another opponent, you can still utilize this card. And finally, for real this time, we have access to all of these basic mountains. These are the old Arena promo ones, the original foils from the original Urza's block. Love John Avon Mountains. This was where they had the panorama set of the original Urza block. They all had 4 different artworks that if you line them up correctly, they made a pretty picture. And just, 30 of these exact ones. I've had these for an obscenely long time. Then it's just depressing to think of how much stuff I got rid of in 2020, but these have sustained. I literally had a binder of just basic lands. And these were last, I believe, I think I showed these off first in my Adamaro First to Desire deck, like a long time ago, but we've been holding on to these. We will always hold on to these. Even if I try to sell out of the game again, all my cards I can probably get rid of, but I will still hold on to these beautiful mountains. But let's wrap up the video. We got a little long-winded. We started talking a whole bunch here. Let's get the OG Akroma out, the actual factual Akroma, the best artwork in my opinion. I would always recommend, you want to keep up with the era of EDH, the power creep that's going on. You should always have access to a deck that can compete with what you're playing against. But if you have access to the funds to have a pet deck, something that you can run a commander that might be wildly outdated, that you just really like the card, I recommend you do that, because you should always have access to something that you just want to have, not with the intention of winning every game. Obviously, in Commander 4-player, you want to have a 25% chance to win. That's always an ideal thing to do. It doesn't always work out. What does always work out is having a deck that you know may not have a higher chance to win, but you love that deck. It is piloted by a commander that you love casting. You love getting kills with this nearly 20-year-old piece of paper. And that's why we're back on Akroma here. This was slowly rebuilt from my Holga deck that I did a deck tech on last year. And I literally just started morphing it back. And as I realized what I was doing with Holga, it was becoming Akroma all over again. So we just pulled Holga right out of the command zone, put Akroma back in, and we're back home. It's more homey. But yeah, let's go ahead and cut off here. I know I could ramble on for a lot. I have a lot of decks to go over here and some topics I'd like to talk about, some weird topics and touchy topics. We'll get into each video. But if you have any of these vintage old decks, old legendaries that you've been maintaining, please share with me. I love hearing about things like this. Again, I'm not a content creator. I don't care if you like or subscribe. But what I do care about are cool decks. And seeing somebody playing a vintage commander, something that is obviously outdated, tell me how you're keeping it going. What are the cards that you've seen recently? Like the new cards printed that are just actually really, really good. Because like this is probably the only card printed in the past 5 years that actually helps Akroma. Like, yeah, we have other newer cards that are helpful for expensive commanders, but this is literally the only card recently that actually actively helps Akroma. So it's interesting to see new cards get printed over the years that are slowly actually just like giving a small nudge to something else. But I'll cut it off here. I hope you all have a wonderful June and a wonderful Pride Month. And I'll catch you all in the next video.